Hi, I'm Ellen Gormley, and welcome to my channel. Hi, welcome to part 2 of pattern reading with Ellen Gormley. This is a crochet pattern that I designed for redheart.com a few years ago. And so I cut off the name. Oh, the Tea Party Cardigan. I was like, oh, I cut off the pattern name. But here's the pattern name. It's the Tea Party Cardigan. And then this little blurb about the pattern is called Romance, just in case you wanted to know. And then here it's designed by me, and then here's the front matter part that we talked about in part 1 of pattern reading. So it tells you what you will need. Now, because this is a garment design, there's a little bit extra nuances here for us to talk about. So it's this particular yarn is what was used in the pattern for in the photo. So often I call this is the project. And so the one used in the project, the yarn used in the project is this, the one shown. And it says 1, parentheses, 1, 2, 2, 2, 2 skeins of 1969 wintergreen. And it specifies an H size 8 hook, which is a 5mm, and says you need a yarn needle. Now it gives you the gauge, and so you need to match this gauge if you want the pattern to fit like it does in the photo. Also, it's important to know that it tells us up here that directions for this pattern are written for size 2 years. Then changes are in parentheses for size 4, 6, 8, and 10 years. Okay, so let's go back to the number of skeins of yarn used. So given this important information, we know that 1 skein is needed for a size 2, and then in parentheses, it would be sizes 4, 6, 8, and 10. So if you're making this pattern for an 8-year-old, then you might want to get out your handy dandy pen, and you might want to go ahead and circle all the 8s. So if you know that 2 is the first number, and then 4, 6, 8, and 10 are in parentheses, and you're making the size 8, then you know that you need 2 skeins. So this is for the 2-year-old, this is for age 4, age 6, age 8, age 10. So you know you need 2 skeins if you're going to make this in the size 8. Then I would go through the rest of your pattern. Remember, you should always read the entire pattern before you get started, and you should go through and circle all of the things that pertain to the size 8, because that's what you've chosen to make. So with that theory then, this would be the size 2, this would be the size 4, this would be the size 6, and this would be the size 8, and this would be the size 10. So it'll make your pattern easier to read if you go and circle that one that pertains to the size 8 all the way around. Now these parentheses get a little bit complicated here in this measurement section because it's inches and then centimeters. So just choose the one that matches what you usually use so you understand best how it works. So when you're choosing which size to make for your child or for the doll or whoever you're making it for, you know that for the size 8, it will end up with a chest measurement of 31.5. So 31.5 inches all the way around the chest here. And so you want to leave a little bit of space between the sweater and your child so that it's not skin tight. It's not supposed to fit like a swimsuit. It's maybe even supposed to fit over a top. So you want it to be loose enough and comfortable enough. So I would say that if your child is like a size 28 or 29 with a measuring tape around the child's chest, then a 31 would be a good size to make because it would give the child a little bit of wiggle room, literally wiggling room in that sweater. So if your child is actually measuring 31 inches, you don't want to make an item that's 31 inches. You want to give that child a little bit of room to move, and maybe even a little room to grow. But room to move is the number one priority. So the point is, don't match this exactly to the size of your child. give your child a little bit of room. Okay, so that's how we chose that. And then, so here's the special stitches section for this pattern. This one uses a cluster and it's abbreviated CL. And cluster is not an abbreviation that's the same for every pattern. So you always need to read the special stitches. And if you see cluster and you think, oh, no problem, I've done clusters hundreds of times before. Well, okay, yes, you absolutely could have, and you could be a total expert in clusters. But you need to make sure that you understand what cluster this pattern uses. And it could be different from the one that you've used in the past, because us designers tend to like do things freaky different ways because we like to get creative. So make sure that you read this section carefully and understand how to make the stitch that you think you already know. So just to make sure it is in fact the stitch you've done before. Don't assume that when you see cluster that, oh, no problem, I know what a cluster is. Well, a cluster could be different from pattern to pattern, just like a shell could be different from pattern to pattern. And a decrease is different from pattern to pattern. So you need to know exactly which one they're using. So in this case, the cluster in the pattern is going to be abbreviated as CL. So whenever you see the CL, you know it is cluster and it's referring to this particular stitch. Yarn over, and for this explanation in this special stitches section, they spelled out every word instead of abbreviating them. So yarn over, and this is a good tip, by the way, if you're ever having a hard time understanding all of the gobbledygook that is a bunch of abbreviations in a pattern, spell it out for yourself. Write out every word if necessary so that you can get it, or write out longhand every word of the particular section that you're having trouble with. So yarn over, pull up a loop in indicated stitch or space. Oh, that one's abbreviated. Yarn over and draw through 2 loops. And then remember the brackets from part 1 of reading a yarn pattern, a crochet pattern. The bracket means that everything that's inside the bracket, you're going to do a specific number of times, and the times is going to be listed immediately after the closing bracket. So this one says, do all of this stuff inside the brackets twice. Then yarn over and draw through all the 4 loops that are on the hook. So when you get to this point and you have 4 loops on the hook, you know you're correct, you're gold. So that's how to do this cluster for this pattern. Then this pattern has an interesting section. Not every pattern will have this, but this pattern has a little section where it's like explaining the pattern to you. And then later in the row by row instructions, it'll say repeat the cluster pattern. So you have to know what the cluster pattern is in order to do that. So this is really important information. Chain a multiple of 4 stitches plus 2. So if you want to, and I advise this strongly, if you want to learn the pattern first before you set into making the actual garment, then you should make a swatch with these instructions. So you should chain a multiple of 4. So either make, and you should make several. So your swatch should be like 4 inches square. So you should make at least 16. So 4 times 4 is 16. So you can make 16 stitches or 20 stitches or any number that's divisible evenly by 4. And then after you've done that many stitches, add 2 more chains. So make a multiple of 4 and then add 2. And that will give you the correct number of stitches necessary to practice your swatch. And your swatch, here's the instruction. And we have not learned yet the asterisk or the star. So let's talk about that. So the setup row, they're not even counting that as a row 1. Notice they're counting that as, and I say they, but it's really me with my tech editor and the symbol diagrammist and everybody else. So it's really kind of a team of people who work on patterns. So at one point they decided to make a setup row, which does not even count as a row. Like they started row 1 later. So the setup row, the foundation row, is on the wrong side. So you chained a multiple of 4 plus 2, and now you're working back. For right-handers, this is the direction. And so you would single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and then don't do anything for the star, but keep an eye on it. chain 3, skip 3 foundation chains, single crochet and next chain. Okay, then it says repeat from star. So you go back and do this part again. And then it says repeat from star, and you go back and do this again. So you keep doing this section here until you reach the end. Okay, so this is the point in which you start repeating. The star marks the spot. It's kind of like the X. The X marks the spot, but the star or asterisk is where you start repeating, because it tells you repeat from that point over and over again till you get to the end. And that's how they get away with telling you just to chain a multiple of 4 stitches, because you could chain 100 stitches and this would still be correct. You still would just repeat this asterisk section from the asterisk to the semicolon again and again until you reach the end of your chains. Okay, so remember, the brackets tell you to do things a set number of times, and it will tell you exactly how many times. But when there's an asterisk, you're repeating from that point until, and then it'll tell you until until the end, or until the point, or until the underarm, or whatever it is for the pattern. Then row 1 counts chain 3, and that counts as 1 double crochet here and throughout. So whenever you're doing a chain 3 at the beginning of the row, it's just counted as a double crochet. Cluster is CL. Look, there's an asterisk, but we're going to ignore it for now, because the very first time you do it, you just ignore it until it tells you repeat from, and then you go back to that point and do it again. And then you go back to that point and you do it again until to the last chain 3 space. Oh, okay, so it's not the end here. So here's a great example. So this time you're supposed to repeat this section from the star to the semicolon as many times as it takes until you get to the last chain 3 space. And at that point, go ahead and finish the instruction by clustering in the last chain 3 space and double crochet in the last single crochet. Got it? So it's really important to read very carefully and to do exactly what it tells you to do, even if it doesn't make sense to you at the time. Just give it a try, follow blindly, and you'll see if it works or not. Now, it's possible that mistakes happen in patterns. Everybody tries their best to make sure that no mistakes ever happen in a pattern, but we are human people and we do the best we can, and we hire tech editors to help us with this, and so that's why it's important to just be kind. You know, kindness, there's no charge for kindness. So repeat rows 1 and 2 for the clusters pattern. So you're just going to repeat row 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2. You never have to repeat the setup row again, because it's only telling you to repeat 1 and 2. So the setup row doesn't really count as a row. It was just like the foundation that the house was built on. Okay, and so one more little section, and then I'll let you go for this part of pattern reading, because I want to get down to this little part down here. So remember that we were supposed to circle everything that pertained to size 8 if we were making the size 8 pattern. And so we know to begin this pattern, we would need to chain not 71 for the size 2 or 74 for the size 4, but 83 for the size 8, because that is the size we're making. And then when we follow all the instructions, it tells us to turn at the end of the row, and then the dash, everything behind the dash indicates how many total of something we will have at the end of that row. Now, if we're making the size 8, we need to have 27 chain 3 spaces. If we're making the size 2, then we would need to have 23 at the end of the row. So are you following? So make sure that you are following the correct number so that you make sure you're following the pattern correctly. And that is part 2 of learning how to read crochet patterns. And I appreciate your attention, and I hope you let me know if you have questions down below. And thank you so much to Red Heart for sponsoring free patterns. Yay! Thank you, Red Heart. Go check out redheart.com. And this is the Tea Party Cardigan if you're interested. All right, see you next time.